Current surveys by an opinion research portal from spring 2019 examined the attitude of the European public towards Brexit in a comparison of countries with France, Germany, Ireland, and they produced surprising results at the time. One thing is certain, it's a mess. That's how the New York Times summed up the chaotic conditions on the island in 2019 and on the day when Britain was supposed to officially leave the European Union the first time. The rest of the world was also confused about the United Kingdom, which is still very divided about how and they left the Union and everything. In a hastily arranged coordination rounds with the EU, the exit date was first postponed to April 12th and then to October 31st, and it was a complete chaos. And they did finally leave, and we are now seeing the first consequences. But it was quite interesting how people were thinking about the whole topic at that time. Because the country was more deeply divided than in the referendum. And in Brussels, the voices of those who were losing patience with Theresa May and the British Parliament were increasing. At the time, the EU Council President Tusk warned that the EU had to devote itself to more important tasks than the negotiations that had then been going on for 3 years, and therefore they welcomed the postponement of the data to the end of October. And the fight against misinformation campaigns before the European elections, the trade relations with the USA, and the strengthening of the EU internal markets were urgent topics on the agenda of that time. But how did the rest of Europe view the turbulent Brexit process? Did people in France and Germany still understand what's happening between Brussels and London, and why the British haven't left much more quickly? But the more important question is, how much of a deterrent does the Brexit chaos have on other EU countries wanting to leave? And that also included Ireland. The surveys from the opinion research portal What UK Thinks EU from spring 2019 examined the Europeans' public attitude towards Brexit in a comparison of countries and produced some interesting results that are still quite valid today. French President Emmanuel Macron was particularly harsh towards Great Britain at the 2019 EU summit in mid-April and suggested that the extension deadline for the UK should be postponed to the end of June at the most. And he wanted to show a hard stance because everyone was fed up with the whole thing. And when asked what priorities the EU should set in the negotiations, over a third of the French said that under no circumstances should Britain be granted the rights of an EU member state without still being a member. And that is one of the reasons why it happened to become that way, and why we are talking about so many repercussions today still. And that is one thing why it's quite interesting that sorry, I know there are a lot of rejoiners, but although that is the wrong word in itself already, because it wouldn't be a rejoining, the process would be starting over, that they misperceive the whole situation in Europe. I started this with a 2019 thing to show something, because the people in 2019 were so fed up with the behavior of the British in the negotiations with the EU that we still see today that they wouldn't even welcome the UK back. It helped us a lot here in continental Europe, in the other 27 EU states still, because I talked about Brexit a few days ago again, about what Alice Weidel is doing, but no one seriously here ever thinks about Brexit. In France, the extreme right wing has scrapped their plans to make big campaigns with Frexit. Even Viktor Orban, the hardcore right-winger from Hungary that is stirring up the EU quite often, is talking about leaving the EU, because every EU member state of course, the governments know what benefits they get from the EU. Viktor Orban never tried that. Viktor Orban knows how much money his country is getting from the EU and what advantages they get from the EU. The former Polish government never tried, despite all their majorities in Poland and all the influence they had on the media and the jurisdiction, which was a big problem with the EU, but they never tried to leave the EU because they got so much money out of the EU and all the other bonuses of being a member, not to mention. And Ireland is one of the best examples. They were I don't want to offend anyone, but I have to explain it somehow. They were not in a very good situation when they joined the EU. They could join because they managed to get through the whole application process and everything and so on, but they weren't the big economic powerhouse in Europe. But look at Ireland today. Ireland is doing very well economically. Ireland is compared to many other countries, thanks to the development while being an EU member, going quite well through all the crises we have. No one is going through there untouched, but could be much worse. And they are a thriving economy, and they even benefit from Brexit in some cases. And so there nobody would talk about leaving the EU. But in all other EU member states, there is almost no right-wing party anymore that wants to leave the EU because they saw the chaos of Brexit. They saw the chaos of the negotiations in 2019. They saw the whole chaos after starting to implement Brexit. Brexit is not done for ages. There's still a lot of transitional periods here. There's still a lot to come in case of Brexit and Brexit repercussions. And we have for long not seen the end of it, and not what the situation will be in the end. But there will be kind of an awakening. We see that a lot of people in Britain are convinced that Brexit was a mistake. But we still see that about 30% would still vote the same way. And that is not enough for any party to campaign for joining the EU again. And that's how I put it. I don't put it as rejoin because it would be joining again. Because Britain, not Great Britain, the United Kingdom would have to apply as any other country that wants to be part of the EU has to apply. And they have to go through the whole negotiation process, even if they would decide to do that. And recently I said a referendum would be required to do that. Ellie, I saw your comment about this. Of course, I didn't mean it's legally required to do that. The referendum in the first place was a non-binding referendum. It's always the decision of Parliament. But because of how everything went, about the division in the country and everything else, that would require another referendum, and it would require a referendum with a clear vote towards joining the EU. And that is what I meant with a referendum is needed, because it's politically needed. It is emotionally needed and not legally required, just to make that one clear. But that is something that no party will touch. I'm talking a lot about the parties and the general election. And so you know that in none of the campaigns anybody is talking about joining the EU again. And I'm talking about the big parties. I'm talking about the Conservatives definitely won't, because their right wing will dominate the party for the rest of the year, and after the election and the election defeat probably even more. And Labour is too scared to not win back the so-called red wall in the north of England if they say anything about joining the EU, even the customs union or the single market, on the very difficult ways to do that. I know that. I did videos on more details on that, so I'm not repeating that all the time, but it's not that easy to do that. And it would be stupid to do that, because full membership gives you the same more benefits, and you have a say in what's happening. Because countries that are only in the single market and the customs union, which we have, do not have a say about all the alignments that are necessary for being in there. And so I always would prefer the joining before I would think about anything like this, but that's the British people. But the rest of Europe is still quite angry about the British, about all the behavior from the time of the Brexit referendum until today. Until the negotiation, there's always trouble. I mean, the DUP is the biggest troublemaker at the moment, although they finally returned to Stormont. But even with the Windsor framework and everything else, we still expect more of those rhetorics, especially from the Conservative Party as well, after an election defeat. And so we are talking about decades here. And I don't think that I will see the United Kingdom join the EU again in my lifetime. And I just wanted to make this video today just to show one thing, because it was a bit of a reaction on the comments under the videos recently to bring some things again, and to make one thing a little bit more clear. I was I'm not saying babbling, but I was stuttering a bit during the video, and with a video like this in between, I wanted to show that is the reason why I always, because of a non-native speaker, I'm writing a text before I'm filming and having a teleprompter here, because speaking English just out of my mind while not living in the UK anymore. I have lived in the UK, but at that time I was thinking in English, but nowadays I'm not thinking in English anymore. I film a lot in English on different topics, but I'm not thinking in English anymore. And so it's a little bit more different with the flow of the text, so to speak. And with a video like this in between, I just wanted to make sure you will understand why I'm using that teleprompter, because sometimes people complain about this, but it is much easier to get the information to you that I wanted to give to you, and not to forget, of course, but also not to say something because of being a non-native speaker. But nevertheless, if you want to see another one of my videos where I'm a little bit more fluent than in this one, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.